Just as Zaram finished cooking and was serving her husband's favorite dish into his native pot, her sister Ola burst into the kitchen breathless and urgent. Zaram's curiosity was aroused as she wondered what could be so pressing that Ola couldn't wait until sunset to share. But before she could ask, Ola blurted out the shocking news of Nkem's marriage to a new wife. The husband is at Mazi Okafor's compound performing the traditional marriage rites for their youngest daughter Chisom. Without hesitation, Zaram took off in a sprint, her heart racing with emotions as Ola chased after her, trying to calm her down. But Zaram was too consumed by the betrayal she felt. All she could think of was why her beloved husband would betray her so. She had devoted herself to being a faithful wife to Nkem and a nurturing mother to their daughter Mma. She had gone above and beyond to support her husband, from being his rock to seeking blessings for his well-being at their village shrine. She could not help but wonder what more she could have done to be the perfect companion. It was unbelievable to her how the man who had whispered sweet nothings and professed his love to her every night these past years would turn around and betray her. With a heavy heart, she arrived at Mazi Okafor's compound. As Zaram laid eyes on the new bride, the reason for Nkem's frequent visit to Mazi Okafor's compound became painfully clear. The young woman's skin was as smooth as glass, radiant and unblemished, like a mirror reflecting the beauty of youth. Her full, luscious breasts and slender waist, adorned with multiple beads that shimmered with every movement, seemed to mesmerize all who gazed upon her. As she moved to the rhythm of the traditional band, her slender figure captivated everyone present, leaving Zaram to confront the harsh reality of her own fading beauty and the appeal of fresh youthful charm. In anger, Zaram lunged towards Nkem, her emotions raw and uncontrollable. She grabbed his waist, demanding answers for the pain he had inflicted upon her. But Nkem was dismissive, his eyes filled with irritation at the sight of her as he shook off her grip. Nkem threatened Zaram to return home or face dire consequences. Zaram's anger flared again, and she charged towards the table covered with traditional delicacies, intent on destroying the symbols of his new marriage. But Nkem's words halted her in her tracks. Tread carefully, Chizaram, lest you find yourself returning to your parents' compound. The tenderness that once characterized his tone was gone, replaced by a cold detachment that pierced her heart. He no longer called her Zaram, the name he once whispered with affection. With a heavy heart, she yielded to her sister's plea and allowed herself to be led away, the weight of her shattered dreams and broken love trailing behind her like a shadow. On getting home that day, Zaram sat outside her hut waiting to confront Ikem on his return, as tears streamed down her face. Her sister and her daughter Mma tried to console her. It was as if she had lost her husband to the cold hands of death. Just then, Nkem returned home with his new bride Chisom. Ignoring the crying Zaram, Nkem gently set Chisom down at the entrance of the hut and began to move her belongings into the matrimonial room he once shared with Zaram. As night fell, Ola suggested Mma stayed with her until the tension from Zaram's new reality eased. Zaram watched as the warmth of her loved one's presence faded. The chill of loneliness crept in, enveloping her in an embrace of sadness. The once familiar walls of her home now echoed with the laughter of another, a constant reminder of what she had lost. As the night wore on, the sweet melodies of love making filled the air, a symbol of passion and intimacy that Zaram could not escape. The tender moments she once shared with Nkem now belonged to another, and the pain of that realization was almost too much to bear. As the days went by, Zaram began to accept her new reality. She had come to realize that in this world, a woman's value seemed to fade with age, like a flower that blooms only for a season. Nkem, on the other hand, was basking in the joy of his newfound love, laughing and giggling with his young wife at every turn. Zaram remembered when he used to look at her with the same adoration, but now she was just a shadow of his past. One day, as she was busy in the kitchen, Nkem called out to her in a loud, stern voice, demanding that she moved all her belongings into the abandoned hut close to the kitchen, as his new wife Chisom requires more space for her belongings. He finished and pecked Chisom, who was watching happily while she sat on his laps, reinforcing his devotion to her. Zaram opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat. What was the use, she asked herself, when she hadn't even been invited into their matrimonial room since Chisom's arrival? With a heavy heart, she nodded in agreement and began to pack her things, her eyes brimming with tears. As Zaram navigated her new circumstances, Chisom blossomed as the beloved wife, her desires growing more extravagant by the day. She would unleash her wrath when her requests weren't catered to, threatening to leave Nkem if he didn't comply. Her demands ranged from succulent bushmeats to precious beads and lavish wrappers. Nkem's days were gradually filled with either begging Chisom to stay with him or rushing to fulfill her every wish. But Chisom's appetite for luxury was insatiable. As a result of that, Nkem's finances dwindled and he found himself dodging debt collectors daily and even resorting to stealing from Zaram's little earnings to satisfy Chisom's cravings. The once peaceful household was now filled with quarrels and disagreements, with Chisom's constant requests at its centers. As days turned into weeks, Chisholm's true character slowly unfolded like a delicate flower. But instead of revealing beauty, it exposed a heart that could be cruel and greedy. She would lock Nkem out of their room in the middle of the night if he came home without gifts or money for her to spend, leaving him to face the darkness alone. And to add salt to his wounds, she would cook and eat every one of her delicious meals, never saving any for him. Nkem's heart ached with shame and sorrow. And rather than finding solace in the loving embrace of Zaram, who had been wrongly cast aside, he would choose to sleep under the stars, his heart heavy with grief. This painful circle continued for Nkem until Chisom came up with a solution to satisfy her greed. On that fateful day, Nkem's journey home was filled with anxiety, his mind preoccupied with various ways to explain his inability to fulfill Chisom's latest request. However, fate had a pleasant surprise in store for him. As he approached their home, he was surprised to see Chisom dressed beautifully in her finest attire, her waist adorned with sparkling beads, skin radiant with vitality, thanks to the palm kernel oil that glowed like a warm embrace, and her smile was kind and inviting. He couldn't explain this new development. He couldn't explain this new development as Chisom hadn't smiled at him in such a long time. But little did Nkem know, her smile hid a sinister plan waiting to unfold. As he arrived home that day, she ran towards him, her arms wide open as she enveloped him in a warm embrace. Welcome home, my love, she whispered to him gently, her voice like a gentle breeze. With a gentle pull, she led him to their cozy room, where a delicious feast of abasha and dried smoked fish, seasoned with a generous amount of pepper, was waiting for him. As he chewed each bite, Chisholm's tender touch suited his tired back. Although puzzled by her sudden change, Nkem couldn't resist the warmth and affection she showed him. As the night progressed, Chisholm's loving caress and gentle massage put Nkem into a peaceful slumber, rekindling their love in the soft glow of the evening. Later that night, Nkem's eyes fluttered open to find Chisholm's gentle touch stirring him from slumber. She gestured to him to sit up, her eyes wide open with an unspoken urgency. I have something very important to discuss with you, she whispered, her tone low and serious. Nkem rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off sleep. Can't this wait until morning? He asked, his voice heavy with drowsiness. Chisholm's response was firm and insistent. No, it can't wait, she said, her voice laced with a sense of urgency, hinting at a matter that couldn't be delayed. Chisom went on to explain that she had found a lasting solution to Ikem's money problems. She went on to remind him of his promises to take care of her and grant her every wish before she even agreed to be his wife. Nkem nodded in agreement, trying to figure out where the conversation was headed. As Chisom mentioned his daughter Mma, Nkem's confusion turned to disbelief. He couldn't fathom how his young child could be the solution to their struggles or help him keep his promises. But Chisom's words revealed her plan. She had heard that the wealthy Mazi Kanu was seeking a new wife, and she thought Mma, now eligible, was the perfect candidate. Nkem was horrified at the thought of his daughter being married off to a much older man with multiple wives and grown children. He refused to consider it, declaring never. Chisom was surprised by his outburst. She couldn't understand why Nkem was acting stubborn. She's just a few years older than Mma, yet she's married. Why should Nkem's daughter be any different? Her words pierced a sensitive spot in Nkem's heart. Well, she continued, ignoring Nkem's initial disagreement. providing another option to Nkem. Offering a cruel alternative, Chisom went on to give Nkem an ultimatum to either allow his daughter be married off or be sold as a worker to a rich family. Nkem, refusing bluntly, commanded Chisom to stop, as he couldn't understand how a woman would wish such cruel fate on another, talk less of one who is his child. But Chisom's determination was clear. As she proceeded to pack her belongings, her anger and resolve palpable. Nkem's mind raced with the weight of societal expectations and the shame of his inability to provide. He pleaded with Chisom to stay, but her silence was deafening. In desperation, Nkem burst into tears, agreeing to her request in order not to be perceived a failure and to save face. Hmm. His agreement calmed Chisom, and without a word, she went to bed happy and feeling victorious, leaving Nkem on his knees, consumed by his fear and regrets. The next morning, Nkem stood outside his hut, lost in thoughts, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The weight of Chisom's request weighed heavily on him, filling his heart with sorrow. His lips were clenched in anguish, and he occasionally hissed in frustration. Mma and her mother, watching from the kitchen as they prepared breakfast, couldn't help but feel the burden of Nkem's pain. They saw the torment in his eyes and the regret on his face. Their hearts went out to him. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words, a sense of shared suffering hanging in the air. Even though they had been treated horribly by him, they still loved him and remembered all the beautiful memories they once shared. As he stood there, he thought about how to break the news to Zaram, his eyes fixed on her once beautiful face, now a reflection of hurt and sorrow. She had lost weight and looked fragile, as one who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. He called unto her, and she hastened to his side, kneeling before him to wipe the dirt from his feet. In came you called, she said, looking at the man she still acknowledges as her Lord. Nkem couldn't bear to break Zaram's heart further, and could not bring himself to deliver the news. Instead, he asked about her well-being, making Zaram nod in surprise, remembering the last time Nkem showed her such care. Nkem, now convinced of his decision and deciding not to be disgraced, made his way to Mazi Ago's residence, a man known for his constant need of workers on his large farm.